So, Senator, let's begin with the situation on the battlefield at this hour, as you know it. What is the sense you have from the information you're getting about how long Kiev can stand the Russian onslaught and whether Kharkiv is now in Russian control?
Well, David, I want to answer that question, but been thinking a lot about this, put two framing thoughts in place. One, understandably, there's been enormous amounts of anguish and angst about political discourse in our country over the last couple of years. We've seen debates about whether democracy and democracies can hold their own in the 21st century. We wondered whether Western values still will carry weight. What I think we've seen play out not only over the last few days, but over the last few weeks, is that the people of Ukraine are being attacked simply because they wanted to stand with the West, because they embrace those democratic values. And we've seen as well, literally people in nations all over the world stand up not only against Putin's aggression, but also to say those very values of freedom and transparency, democracy, are what people embrace. And I think we don't know how this is all going to play out, but that macro question of democracy versus authoritarianism, at least the people of Ukraine and President Zelensky has answered that resolutely. I know a number of us were wondering a question the other day in the Intelligence Committee, was Zelensky going to be Ghani, the Afghan leader who cut and run once the Taliban started to move forward, or was he going to be Churchill? And so far he has been Churchillian in his response. The second point I just want to raise, David, let me just make this second point very briefly. I want to answer, and I do want to get to the question of what's on the ground. 9 days ago, when you and I were in Munich, and we were trying to make the case that this was a real threat to our NATO friends and allies and others at the security conference, if you would have asked me 9 days later, even though the American intelligence was 100% spot on, almost to the day of when Putin attacked, I don't think we could have expected, one, the Ukrainian resistance, but two, that there would be sanctions placed on Nord Stream 2, that Putin and Lavrov would be literally joined that gallery of rogues like Gaddafi and Assad in terms of being personally sanctioned, that we'd have SWIFT led by the Europeans kicking the Russians' banks out, that we'd see a seizing of the central bank assets and cutting off that we'd actually see the Swiss government join this coalition, and kind of below the radar things like Kazakhstan, a traditionally strong ally of Russia, refused to sanction Putin's activities. Now, on the ground, how long can the Ukrainians resist is a bit of an open question. The Russians are only now throwing the last third of their troops into the fray, and I've been pleasantly surprised so far, but surprised would be the word, that Russia has not launched more major cyber attacks against Ukraine or brought down the internet so that those incredible images of Ukrainians' resistance is getting out to the rest of the world. But this conflict is by no means over, and the overwhelming power of the Russian military in a longer struggle, it's hard to not see how they don't continue to make some level of advances.